Welcome to Solo, the single person's guide to a remarkable life. Your host, a behavioral scientist and bachelor, talks to leading experts and successful singles about living solo and living well. Travel more, make things, sleep in when you want to. Here's the playbook for the person who is unapologetically unattached. Now, please welcome Dr. Peter McGraw.
Welcome back. This unplanned episode was prompted by the sudden fear and uncertainty created by the coronavirus pandemic. My guest and I rushed to meet and discuss the situation. Warren Buffett is famous for saying, "Be fearful when others are greedy, and greedy when others are fearful." We would modify that idea to say that when others are reacting negatively, ask how you can react positively. We discussed the importance of asking for help and offering help. That is, physical isolation does not need to equal emotional isolation. We talk about how to adjust your environment given the circumstance, the coping strategies you can use to help with anxiety, and how the current situation may spur important personal and professional changes as you pursue your remarkable life. I hope you find the episode helpful. Let's get started. Welcome to a special emergency episode of Solo, the single person's guide to a remarkable life. I'm Peter McGraw. Today's guest is Isabella Imani.
Hello.
There she is. Isabella is an LA-based relationship and behavioral coach, specializing in helping clients through inner alignment and goal setting. We're going to find out a little bit more about what those mean. She has more than 7 years of experience in personal development and partnering with leadership of Fortune 500 companies such as Blue Cross Blue Shield, Live Nation, Viacom, and Paramount Studios. She's also a professional speaker and previously worked in HR and operations. Welcome, Isabella.
Hi, thanks, Peter.
Let me just tell the listeners briefly why we're doing a special emergency episode, and it's because of the coronavirus.
What's that?
Pandemic.
What's that? Tell me more.
You work too hard, Isabella. You're working too hard. So I just decided to do this sort of spur of the moment. Mm-hmm. And I have a good friend who had said to me, sent me a text, "Oh my God, I found the perfect person for your podcast. She would be a great guest. She'd be a great guest co-host." And I said, "Who is it?" He gave me your name. I did some Google stalking. I said, "You might be right." And then we set up a call and we got chatting. And I was like, yeah, she's going to be perfect. Huh. And in part because of your own personal and professional experiences, sort of where you are in your life, solo living and beyond, living a remarkable life. And then it was yesterday I basically said, hey, do you want to do a special taping?
Here we are.
And here we are. So thank you so much, Isabella.
Thank you.
So before we get into talking about life, a remarkable life during a pandemic.
Yeah.
Let's get to know you a little bit.
Okay.
If we can. So where do you want to start?
Where do you want? You take the lead.
We can go personal, we can go professional, but we're going to have to cover both.
Give it to me. Give me all of it. Unfiltered.
Let's start personal.
Let's do it.
And we'll cover the solo portion of your life.
Absolutely.
You are single right now.
I'm currently single. I'm dating around. I'm dating around. There is someone that I am seeing consistently.
Okay.
And we have been the best of friends, and I'm so grateful for our friendship and what we share. But it's been a known thing that we are not in a relationship, and that we are free to see other people as well.
Okay, so you're not doing the don't ask, don't tell. You actually have talked about the fact that nice.
Yeah, which is really nice. I've never experienced anything like that, and I told you before that prior to this last year, I'd always been a serial monogamist, and that was a part of my paradigm. Actually, I thought that that's the way it was, and that's the way that I will always be. Mm-hmm. And a little over a year ago, I got out of a very serious relationship with someone that I thought I was going to marry. And that actually jump-started this whole last year of doing an insane deep dive into personal development and my own journey of who is Isabella without the presence of someone else. And I had never known that part of me. And, coming from my background of always being a naturally independent person, I found that I was actually no longer independent when I was in the presence of a significant other, largely in part because I didn't love myself enough or know myself enough to be independent. So in this last year, I've experimented with different types of relationships, and the way that I show up in them. And it's been a great journey. And this is my first time experiencing kind of we're going to call it ethically non-monogamous relationship.
Episode number 3.
With someone that I care about so deeply and have grown to love in such a deep romantic way. But just saying that you are your own person, as am I, and let's just meet in the middle, unattached to the outcome, and just really being present in our space together.
I think that's great. One of the things that's really nice too is just the honesty that goes along with that decision.
Yeah.
So being free to explore your independence, perhaps seeing other people, but also having this sort of foundational connection with someone who you're very close with.
You learn a lot about yourself and another person, especially how to interact and love another person and how you want to be loved when you ask the hard questions and you are forced to remove your ego or fear in this situation. Because there have been moments when I know my ego has been hurt for one reason or another because I thought things should be a certain kind of way. And then I realized that that's my own paradigm that needs to be shifted. And the way that I respond to situations is no longer the same.
What, do you have an example of that you can share?
Yeah. Let's see. When we were kind of exploring this portion, we started out as friends, and then it kind of happened.
Who started it?
I think it was a mutual thing. I think when we met, we were definitely attracted to one another. But it was interesting because he wasn't actively pursuing me in a way that was definitive, where I'm used to guys pursuing me and saying, Isabella, you're what I want. And it's very direct, and it's no longer, I've never had a 6-month chase that I was like, oh, cool, we're going to be pen pals for the rest of our lives. It's like, fuck it. No. So that's ultimately what it was. Because he lives in Santa Monica. And for listeners that don't live in LA, I live in Hollywood. So we've got this thing here where if you're more than 5 miles away from your other person, it's technically a long distance relationship.
Well, and also not all 5 miles are created equal. So those 5 miles are very difficult because you have to cross the 405.
So technically we're in different countries.
Yes. It's like, I know people who would rather who would rather date someone in another city than in Santa Monica.
Exactly. So we went a long time being pen pals and just seeing each other at mutual events.
That's funny.
But never actively pursuing it until one day we finally made it happen, and then instantly we did the thing, and it was great. And ever since we've been kind of in this
on the reg.
Oh, yeah, it's been bomb.com, let me tell you. But there have been instances where we've had conversations of, are you seeing anyone else?
Yes.
Or, what do we want this to be? And every now and then, he would bring someone up, and it wasn't in a way of hurting. It was just in a way of, just direct honesty. And I remember and whether I expressed it to him or not, actually in the moment, I probably didn't, because I was really hurt and I was really trying to wrap my head around this, even though we agreed that we were just being really great friends that were casually seeing each other. I still felt, I'm human, a kind of emotion where I was like, oh, darn, I'm not the only one, or maybe I'm not so special. And then that actually gave me an opportunity to learn so much about myself, because the goalpost didn't change. What we said we wanted is what we wanted. It was my feelings around that changed because I'd never entered this territory before. And so with that, I actually had to do a deep dive within myself, because it wasn't up to him to alleviate my personal ego or my anxiety around that. I had to really say, Isabella, where is this stemming from for you? Are these like emotional wounds that hadn't healed yet from past relationships? Or is this a growing pain that you're experiencing because you've never been in, this ethically monogamous relationship before? Mm-hmm. So really doing the inner work.
Non-monogamous.
Exactly. Ethically non-monogamous. Thank you for that correction.
that's how hard it is.
That's huge. Exactly. And so then I had to do the inner work and I had to say, okay, like this is the emotional trigger. What meaning am I giving to like this event? And this is an actual exercise that I give to my clients.
I was just going to say this. I want to say this, like, what's great about this is we're going to get to Isabella's professional stuff.
Yeah.
But she's using her own techniques on herself.
You got to practice what you preach.
As she's going through this.
Absolutely.
As you're tussling with this, this kind of, would you call it experimenting? You're trying on?
Yeah, I think, and the other thing that I talk with my clients through as well is incremental trial and error. Mm-hmm. We can't be led by fear. And one of my big things right now is if it scares me, I probably should do it.
I have that same saying.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God, I'm scared to do this. I have to do this now.
Yeah. Even being on this podcast, I was like, oh fuck, if this scares me, I probably should do it. Like, if I tank, so be it, right? Like, but let's lean into this. Yes. Let's acknowledge the fear because as we know, when you repress your emotions, it will manifest itself in so many different ways. So another exercise is saying this scares me. Okay. Acknowledge the fear, label it for what it is, and then lean into it. So there was a series of things there that I had to do in my personal life that I still do. And it's funny because he'll probably listen to this because he doesn't know like the half of it. But I was like, oh, last week I was starting to catch feelings and then I caught myself.
I see. And
then I had to just readjust. Funny, I've never told him that before. But then because it's all
right, dude, now you know.
Now he knows. But what I realized then too is that it's not up for other people. Like it's no one else's responsibility to help us heal but ourselves. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes we think that if we're experiencing a pain that our significant other is responsible for fixing it. I don't believe that's true. Like I fundamentally do not believe that's true. I believe that we can heal in our relationships, but ultimately it is our responsibility to heal from that. So that's what I learned.
That's great. So, two questions. So one is, there's sort of different ways to practice ethical non-monogamy. Yeah. One is like full disclosure, mm-hmm. right? Where you tell maybe a primary partner, I'm seeing this person, I'm doing this, I'm doing that.
Yeah.
And then the other sort of form, it's kind of a lighter form, is I'm doing things out there under these criteria like protection-wise, this and that, all that kind of stuff. And you may or may not go into detail with that. And so it sounds like you have kind of a hybrid of this where some things get discussed, some things don't get discussed.
Yes.
And it was when you were discussing some of those things where some of these pangs started to arise. And so when you didn't know and it was abstract, it was easier to deal with.
Yes. And so what I realized too, and again, trial and error is the best way to learn. My two favorite words this year, safety and boundaries, practicing both of that. And by safety, I actually mean emotional safety.
I see.
That's so important. And by boundaries, I mean the same thing. And so that was a great lesson that I learned because had I not known that I didn't like hearing this information, I wouldn't have been able to express a boundary that mattered to me, which is, hey, like I just assume you're doing these things. I don't need to know the details.
I see.
And that actually has helped significantly because we can still live the same life. The same outcome is the same where we get to be present with one another, love each other for the time that we have. And when we're apart, I don't think twice about it. I know it for what it is. It's not. What's cool about that approach, because it works for me, it may not work for other people. Maybe they want to know who it is you're seeing.
Yes.
I realize that the more detail I know, the more heightened anxiety that it gives me. I would just rather know that you're doing it. I just don't need to know that you're doing it.
Yeah, I think the flip side of that is a person who's like, okay, who are these people? What's your relationship? And wanting to know much more as a way actually that would have the opposite effect, which is it's assuaging to have that worked out.
Yeah.
So, but I always use this term for now or forever, for single people.
Yeah.
But you're not necessarily interested in a solo life forever. You may at some point want to couple up in a more monogamous way.
Potentially. And it's really funny that you asked that because I've been asking myself this question for a long time, to the extent of a year.
Okay, sure.
That's what I mean by that.
Look, the last 24 hours have felt like a long time.
That's true. That is true.
Oh, as an aside, we are taping this on Friday the 13th. So this is sort of like a big this has been a big day for much of the world.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that.
And so the last 24 hours, I think, have been a long 24 hours.
That's
for
true.
A long period. For a lot of people.
A lot of us. That's true.
So your year does qualify as long.
So it's funny because the more that I experiment with this relationship or others, the more I learn so much about myself. So an example is, and maybe this is TMI, but I recently went to
By the way, you can't have too much TMI on a podcast called Solo,
well,
the Single Person's
if
Guide
listeners
to a
are open to
Remarkable
it.
Life.
Okay, here we go.
We are very high on openness to new
this
experiences.
is really getting in there. I recently went to a play party. And that's the way that I do want to frame it. So it was very well done, and it was out of like love and respect, where there were couples there. We laid down ground rules, and it was just a very loving community. And I hadn't been to a play party that was actually this well done. If I could really write up
well curated play party.
It was just everyone there was just so about giving. It was almost off of Burning Man principles. And if you know what those mean, what I'm trying to say is that it really is about giving to the community versus what you can take away. And it came from a very warm and authentic place. And while at this play party, I learned a lot about myself. There wasn't a ton of playing that I was doing because I was in a learning space where it's like, how am I going to react in this play party? Do I want to be in this environment? Will I feel uncomfortable and end up leaving? So this was my first time ever really experimenting and seeing what Isabella was like in that context.
I would say that there's a probably useful lesson to learn from this. Like, if you're interested in trying something out like that, like going to a sex club or going to a sex party or a play party, whatever it might be, it probably works best if you approach it from, I'm going to observe first, and then see how it all feels versus kind of jumping full on in. Probably.
So I always bring it back, and this is an exercise that I do with myself and one that I do with my clients, the intention. Really going for the intention here. So before I even agreed to go into this play party, I thought about it and I was like, Isabella, are you going for the ego or are you going for the soul? What is your intention here? Because I think in traditional society, people think of play parties as, who knows, right? Like, but I think traditionally, and this is a generalizing statement.
I think what it is, they have particular images of it from Eyes Wide Shut or from pornography or whatever it is. And that might not match reality very closely.
Exactly. There's a way to do it where you can be a part of this environment where it actually nurtures the soul. And I had never been a part of this where it was so soul driven, where it was a community and it was about, are you feeling safe? Are you feeling comfortable? And how do I serve? And there were a lot of people there that weren't playing, and we were just having drinks and we were having the best time, and it was just no pressure. And it was the safest environment. And I say this because this kind of goes back to your original question. Is this now or is this forever? Mm-hmm. And what I learned about myself in that environment was I am okay with being in even a monogamous relationship and inviting play into my relationship where I couldn't have told you that a few weeks ago, as long as it's in the safe context.
Oh, that's interesting. I have a friend who's a listener of this, and he uses this term. He says, I'm 90% monogamous.
Oh.
Which I think is an interesting way to think about, like, we have this idea that it's either all or nothing kind of thing. But he's like, no, 90% of the time, I just want this partner.
Yeah.
And then whatever those other times and whatever that thing may be like, and it might be with the partner going to a party or whatnot.
Yeah.
By the way, I actually don't need to know or want to know whether it's for now or forever. Mm-hmm. I actually think that that's a tough question to answer. Yeah. Because the moment you know someone says, well, I definitely want this thing, you know, I much more I think most people would be better off that says, I would like that thing, but I don't know what the future holds.
Yeah. I think that but though is really important, because without understanding yourself, how can you actually know? So you and I first started our conversation, not this one, but when we first met up like an hour ago, talking about concepts like human domestication and fitting into these boxes that society says we have to fit into.
Yes.
A concept like a play party is non-traditional. Can we agree on that?
Yes.
And so without ever having gone to one, and I'm not saying everyone needs to go to one, but without having gone to one and gone to one that makes you feel safe, how would you know this is something that you don't want to invite? I'd been to play parties before that never made me feel emotionally safe with a significant other that almost objectified the experience and in many ways ruined it for me.
I see.
But now as Isabella being solo and experimenting and learning more about herself, I was able to make a well-informed decision about what I like without, the influence of someone else. And I was able to derive from that experience a few weeks ago that I could be open to this.
I see. That's great.
And I think that's so powerful for listeners here is just opening your horizons a little bit more.
I will say this. I want to transition into some of your professional stuff, and then I want to spend the rest of the time talking about what's going on in the world right now, because I think a lot of people are thirsting for perspective and information. One of the things that I just lost it here for a second is, I think that there are listeners going, ew, when hearing the terms, ethical non-monogamy, hearing story about going to a play party. What I like, and I want to repeat what you essentially just said is, well, if you haven't done it or you haven't tried it, and at the very least, even if you just haven't considered that it might work for some people, even if it might not work for you, be careful about using your fear or your disgust response or whatever it is to make a judgment.
Yeah.
Because everybody who's listening to this podcast who's single and wants to be comfortable being single knows what it's like to be judged in that same way.
Exactly.
Right? So they know exactly what it's like. I mean, what I love about the listeners of this podcast is they're the person at Thanksgiving dinner.
Yes.
Right, who's at dinner, who's single.
Yeah.
And people are asking them what's wrong with them. Right. What's wrong with you? Why can't you do what we're doing?
Yeah.
Where the assumption is what they're doing is right and what you're doing is wrong. And because you're not doing what they're doing, you're somehow lacking and whatnot.
Yeah.
Well, if there's someone like that at every Thanksgiving dinner across the country, or every whatever meaningful religious dinner across the world, that's just a lot of people who are not being celebrated for walking a different path.
Yeah.
And then if you're not being celebrated for walking a different path and you want to be, then all my thing is just be careful about doing it to others who are walking a slightly different path.
Yeah. A slight reframe, and we talked about reframing here, that it's basically the same thing said differently, is instead of, celebration is a beautiful, powerful word too. So I love that. But also just, oh goodness, now I totally lost it. I'll come back to it. But there, in terms of a reframe, celebration is important, but also just acknowledging too, when we're able to take off the emotional mask, it allows other people to show up authentically as well. And so that's...
What do you mean by that? What do you mean by the emotional mask?
So emotional mask is that's a great question.
We're getting into your professional
Thank you. There we
stuff.
go. So when we're able to show up authentically within ourselves, for better or for worse, even saying play party, right? I know there are going to be listeners out here that listen to this. My mom will listen to this, and my mom does not know about this. It doesn't matter. If this is a part of my experience and my journey, showing up authentically takes bravery, and that takes bravery for everybody. So when we're able to take off that mask and express it from an authentically true place, that allows everyone else to take off their emotional mask as well. And if nothing else, I think that's the big thing that I want listeners to take away from this is in sharing this experience that was one of growth for me. I hope that actually takes bravery to express out loud. I hope it allows other people to say, you know what? I've been curious about communicating X, Y, and Z sexual desire to my current partner, but I've been too afraid to say it because what if they judge me?
Yes.
Like, come out of that a little bit. See what happens.
I agree. And so, so I have a whole bunch of, I have so many things. I always say anything worth doing is going to be difficult, and so, and whether that be difficult in terms of effort or difficult because it's scary,
Yes.
What did I say to you right before we started? I said, there's two things I need from you.
Remind me.
I need you to be yourself.
Oh, yes. And to have fun.
Here
we are.
Right. And here we are. We're off to a good start. So I applaud you for that idea. And I do agree with you that being brave, which is asking for what you want and doing what you want to do,
yes,
is just so important.
Absolutely.
In life. And it asking for what you want is brave because you risk being told no, right?
Yes.
Or not getting what you want.
Yes.
But you're certainly not going to get it
Yes.
if you don't ask.
Exactly.
So I think that's great.
Yeah. It also allows for, which is the intention here, greater human connection.
Yes.
Authentic human connection in this day and age where we put on this facade of who we should be, when you can actually say, this is who I am authentically.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much power in being you it's not without fear of judgment because that's not the case.
No,
we all fear
yes,
it. Yes. Right. But it's leaning into that fear and then doing something with it.
Also, here's the thing is there's no avoiding judgment.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So you're either going to be judged for being an actor, bad or good, or you're going to be judged for being the person you are.
Yes.
Right. So you're either going to get judged for this sort of front stage persona that you put forth or your backstage persona. And
exactly.
I like the idea of you should try to live like your backstage persona because that's that's truly who you are.
Yeah, that's the inner alignment portion of it.
Okay. We're going to get to that. So let me just say this. So because you talked about this idea about being connected and social connection.
Yeah.
So that's actually one of the things that prompted me. I think the listener has already a good view of who you are and why you quote unquote qualify to join this, the podcast as a guest. You know, these have been sort of scary times, I think, for a lot of people. So I don't need to recap what's been happening, but I will highlight the speed in which the coronavirus has gone from, it's nothing to worry about, to travel bans, quarantines, and
yes.
run on toilet paper.
Yeah.
You know, that's what's been happening in the last 24 hours.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things that I want to say, and I call it a PSA, call it a caveat, call it whatever you want, is, let's be smart, right? So practice good hygiene, wash your hands, see your healthcare provider if you're showing symptoms.
Yeah.
All of those things are sort of common sense things and important in terms of trying to stop the spread of this.
Yes.
As well as the spread of influenza, which is also a problem and has been a problem, for years.
Yes.
That said, one of the things that I think is interesting is with a lot of social events, business events, classes, places being closed down, shut down, any place that's bringing lots of people together, has an unintended consequence. I mean, and people have even used this term, social distancing.
Yes.
So one solution, I'm using air quotes when I say solution,
yes,
to corona has been to socially distance yourself from people. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you. I wanted to talk to anyone about this idea.
Yeah.
Is
way to make a girl feel special, Peter. She just happened to get me. Got it. Okay.
Thank you for saying yes. I'm a ethical non-monogamous podcaster.
You're very upfront.
You knew that there were others I was considering. So I actually am considering a follow-up with a comic also.
Oh.
And this may turn into a little mini series.
It should. This is important stuff.
But this will be in edition number 1, I promise. So when I heard social distancing, immediately I sat up straight. And I already sit up straight typically.
Yeah, you've got great posture.
Thank you. I tried. Of course, I just sat up straight when I said that. So the thing is, I like to say solo but not alone.
Yes.
So there's a lot of mythology about being single.
Yes.
One is like single people are lonely and single people are socially isolated and so on. Oftentimes it's the opposite.
Yes.
That single people are more connected than married people because it helps to be connected when you don't have one person who is everything, needs to be everything to you. It's actually rather freeing. And it can actually there'd be a lot more utility in having a wide, diverse group of people to rely on as you need to live your remarkable life. When it's only one person, if that person goes down with the coronavirus,
oh no,
there goes your rock. But I wanted to bring this up because how can you're being told to socially distance yourself.
Yeah.
And yet we need people, even if you are comfortable being alone and so on.
Yeah.
What if you get sick?
Yeah.
Right. And so what I want to start to do is invite listeners who are puzzling over what to do
Yes.
to try to start thinking maybe a little bit differently about this. So what is your reaction to that?
Yeah. So first
motivation?
off, I do love that when you called me and you told me kind of your idea behind this and the importance of it, because I agree. And it's really all in the language that you're okay.
I'm about to say something. So one of the great things about Isabella was she goes, let me do a little bit of research. She's like, let me listen to a few podcasts. And then she's like, can we talk on the phone? I have some follow-up questions. So this is the kind of thorough, and she has like a full sheet of paper that she typed out on the computer. So let's just say it took, there's a lot of courting.
And here we are.
To went into this. Okay. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Thank you for courting me so gently. I'm so grateful. This has been such a fruitful experience for both of us, I hope, and the listeners. Okay, so going back to your original question, I think there is a gentle reframe that we're not seeing in the media right now. What we're seeing is a lot of heightened anxiety. Don't go outside. Don't do these things. Don't connect with others physically. To the best that you can, stay in your home, quarantine, work from home.
And a lot of competition, right? So the media images are two people doing a tug of war over the last roll of Charmin.
Yes, yeah.
Right? So that's the newsworthy stuff.
Yeah. But I think, obviously with that, it's clickbait, right? We're almost addicted to seeing that sensational, drama. Right. And as a society, that's whether it's Corona or anything else, that's stuff that gets those headliners that gets the attention.
Yes.
So let's just acknowledge that for what it is, and then take a step back and just say, okay, we get it. So from that perspective, there is, I think, a responsibility that the media has that they're not leveraging to actually say, here's the clickbait stuff, but really, guys, if we're all in this together.
Yeah, that's the problem. I don't feel like we're all there yet.
So less of a social isolation. A good reframe for that would be more or less, physically, you can isolate yourself for health reasons, logical health reasons, but emotionally, that isolation doesn't need to persist. And I think that that's on the media to convey the difference there. While we physically isolate, we don't need to emotionally isolate. And then giving suggestions to listeners, to viewers on how to do that, whether that means calling up your loved ones and expressing, hey, are you doing okay?
Yes.
There's a support system here. Connecting with your loved ones that live in different countries, making sure that they're okay. That's the emotional isolation that doesn't need to exist. And if anything, it actually brings us closer together. And I think that's where, when we're in this area, this heightened stage of anxiety, where we are physically distancing ourselves, let's not forget that we can still pick up the phone, send a thoughtful text message to just bring down that anxiety and say that we're all in it. I'm here for you. I
think that's great.
Yeah.
I think I'll give you three quick examples of this. One of them's ridiculous. So, one is I got a text message from a colleague and friend asking me, what do you think of what's going on?
Yeah.
Right? And I immediately called him.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that's a conversation we want to have.
Yeah.
We don't want to do this via text.
Yes.
Let's just get on the phone.
Yes.
And what was nice about it was we ended up having a lot of laughs.
Good.
It ended up being a nice connection, and it made my day better.
Yeah.
The next one is I have these. So I'm in this sort of high rise. I call it my box in the sky. So I live in a box in the sky. I live in a high rise apartment, a 1-bedroom apartment. I love it. It's not I'd say it's like a cordial building, but not a friendly building.
Yeah.
And it's a building that always seems sort of half full because there's a lot of people. I think it's their second residence. And so
okay.
So I have this young couple who lives across the hall from me.
Yeah.
And they're very LA.
Yeah.
So he is like a party promoter kind of type. Like if you want bottle service, he's like the guy who can get you into the hot club in LA and all that kind of stuff. And then his girlfriend, I actually don't know exactly what she does, but she could be an Instagram model for all I know.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And they are so incredibly friendly to me. It's so refreshing and nice, especially her, because, this is a town where if you're a beautiful woman, you might learn to put some walls up just because there's creeps.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I remember running into him one day and I said, I ran into your girlfriend in the elevator and she was so kind to me.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And so I ran into him yesterday and he said, Man, I went to Trader Joe's today. It was crazy in there. He goes,
Oh, yeah.
He goes, Pete, I am totally stocked up. So if you need anything,
Oh, that's beautiful.
he's like, just knock on the door. I got you covered.
Yeah.
And I like, no one's talking about that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then the last one is, and this is so funny. There's this cafe across the street from me. And I was up super early this morning, and I was working, and I had brought some fruit with me.
Yeah.
And so I had a banana and apple. It was next to my computer. And there was a woman there who's drinking her coffee, and she said, did you get that banana downstairs? And I said, no, I brought it from home. And she goes, oh, yeah, I think they're out. And I said, do you want it?
Oh, Peter.
She goes, and I have to admit,
Yeah.
I never would have offered it to her
Yeah.
if we weren't going through what we're going through.
That is so beautiful. That is so thoughtful. Did she take it?
She did not take it, but she was clearly moved by it.
Yeah.
And then we had this very nice conversation. So she's visiting from Boston. She has a daughter who's in a local college.
Yeah.
Who's the daughter's clearly upset. Her internship's getting canceled. Classes are getting canceled, and so on. And and the mom was just like, I'm just so glad I'm here right now.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Thing. So what I want to say is I think that you're right. Like, I think a lot of these things are happening out in the world.
Yeah.
They're not getting noticed.
Yes.
Because they're not clickbaity.
Yeah.
But I think the idea of if you walk away from this podcast and you go, oh, who could I connect with?
Absolutely.
Who might be struggling, or I'm struggling.
Yeah.
Who might I connect with? Who might help me with this?
I'm actually really grateful that you shared that story or those stories, because I think that hopefully, like, the listeners and I mean, I know certainly myself, I'll internalize that and think about, who else can I reach out to? Am I doing enough in my social circle or in my community to make sure that my inner circle feels loved and feels appreciated and feels supported? And during times like this, that is the most important thing that matters.
Well, you're doing it here not for your inner circle, but for your outer circle.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. I mean, it's this constant. If you think about it, like, the coronavirus is contagious, right? Something not everyone wants to get. But you know what, guys? So is kindness. So is compassion. So is generosity. So think about that before. So someone in my social media feed posted honestly a very frightening photo this morning at 4 a.m.
Okay.
And the caption was, early bird doesn't always get the worm. And essentially in this photo, it was one of our local grocery stores with, oh my goodness, at least 50 people waiting for it to open. And they just looked so distraught.
Yes.
And they obviously weren't necessarily ahead of the game, if that's even a possibility, but just the energy from that photo then broadcasted on this feed where hundreds of other people were going to see that. My thought was, is this content helpful or is this hurtful? What was his intention? And then just like, let's stop there. And then myself, as someone, a consumer of this information, it is then up to my discretion to say, is this content helpful or is this hurtful? And then to either opt out, or then to think twice as well about the shit that I'm posting.
Yes.
Am I going to post things that is helpful for people or things that hurt? So
I think Isabella just dropped a Instagram follower.
Look at that. Oh, look at that. You know who you are.
So one of the things that I also came to was, all right, what are you supposed to do? Right? So we've already covered one thing, which I think is really good. In terms of trying to stay connected, even if you have to be maybe physically disconnected.
Yes.
So, what is it that you can do? So I'm going to offer just a general idea and then let you riff on it. And because you've got a long sheet of ideas.
I got some notes.
So one thing that I would say, this is a fundamental principle of the behavioral sciences. And that is that negative things spur change more than positive things. Okay. So when life is good,
Yes.
when you're healthy, when things are happy, when things are rolling along,
Yeah.
there is no incentive to make change. When you're not happy, when you're not healthy, when things aren't rolling along,
Yeah.
that's often a good motivator of change.
Absolutely.
And so, this is one of those moments. And then the question becomes, well, it's worth it to ask the question,
Yeah.
what change might benefit me?
Yeah.
right? What change might benefit me? And so what's your reaction to that idea?
So I do have like a very high level list of things so I think I'll ask you if this is an okay approach. So I have a high level approach of things that you can do while you're more or less physically isolated in your home.
Okay.
But on a larger scale, things that, we should maybe all reflect on in terms of our life.
Okay.
Because the reality is that people are, worst case scenario, dying from this.
Right.
So if you look at it from that perspective, if I were to die tomorrow, I want you to really think about, did I live my life fully?
Ah, yes. Okay. So let's hold that second one.
Yeah.
Because that's
Yeah.
so big.
Yeah.
Let's get into some tactics.
Quick and easies.
Yeah. Let's build up to the, what is the meaning of life?
Okay.
So yeah, let's talk about a little bit about this idea of what to do.
Yes.
You know, while you're now working at home,
Yeah.
your normal day-to-day has been disrupted.
Absolutely.
Okay. What are some of the ideas you have?
So going back, I'm going to double down on this. So while physical isolation, for the logical reason, is important, that doesn't mean emotional isolation.
Okay, good.
So let's double down on that. Make sure that, we're feeling connected in that sense, because again, a heightened state of anxiety on a global scale, everyone needs to feel loved and supported. So that's number one. So reach out to people that you love. Also be mindful of your environment to the extent that you can while we are in our homes. And it's, it's a gloomy day in Los Angeles. Think about, to the extent that you can, natural light. Can you crack open a window, right? I forgot the actual statistics for the study, but we know that, people that are going through major recovery periods from like a health concern, if they are in environments where they have natural light, they are X% more likely, and it's a significant number. I don't want to reference it because I don't know it off the top of my head, more likely to heal than those that are not in natural light, that aren't in natural environments. So to the extent that you can, get that natural light, crack open that window, get air flotation through your home. Hell, fucking sage your house. I love sage, and I've got the best candles in my house. So do that. Essential oils. Make your home feel like home, because you're going to be there for quite some time.
I'm going to add one to this, if I may.
Do it.
So I have a former assistant whose dad had a saying, which is doing cures the feeling.
Oh, that's great.
And
I
so
like that.
It's focused on, so there's these two forms of coping. So one is called emotional coping, and the other one is called problem-focused coping.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and they both work, and they're both useful, and they should be part of a repertoire of coping strategies that people have. The problem-focused ones are often more action-oriented, or often more behavioral-oriented. So I think there's this sort of idea of like making the most of this time.
Absolutely.
So instead of seeing it as a punishment, seeing it as an opportunity.
Yeah.
And so that's.
It's like an adult snow day. I don't know, maybe.
Yes, and who knows? You might end up having a bunch of them, right?
Exactly.
And so, a big one, and this harkens back to some episodes I taped a while ago, but are coming out now.
Yeah.
And I talk about, and forgive me if you're tired of hearing this, listeners. I talk about this movie Limitless, this Bradley Cooper movie.
Yeah.
And in it, he gets a hold of this pill. This pill that turns him into a genius for sort of short periods of time.
Oh yeah, I heard about that.
Yeah, it's a fun movie. The first time he takes this pill, it's called NZT.
Okay.
This genius drug. He tidies up his apartment.
Well, would you look at that?
Right, and so I would offer, open the shades, get some light, get a little bit of fresh air in.
Yes.
It's not a bad time to take control of your space.
Yes.
And
yes.
And whether you use the Marie Kondo method of this brings me joy, or whatever method that works best for you.
Yes.
That I often feel when I feel really anxious about things.
Yes.
One of the things that I start with is I tidy up my space.
Mm-hmm.
I clean up my space.
I
throw
that.
things away.
Yeah.
I donate things. By the way, what a great time to be donating things.
Yeah.
I recycle things. I donate. I get rid of things. In just in order to be like, oh, it allows me to get a little bit of semblance of control.
Yeah.
And I've just accomplished something.
Yes.
And guess what? I haven't checked Twitter. I haven't watched the news. I've taken a little bit of a break from that scary, uncertain world that's out there right
Absolutely.
now. So
Absolutely.
I'm gonna add that to your list.
So I love that you said that, because one of the things, and we talked about this earlier today, and this is an exercise that I take my clients through, and this is on a much greater scale, but it's kind of, it's about alleviating anxiety. So you said clean up, tidy up your space. When your external world is feeling so chaotic, the only thing you can do is control your internal world. And that means your emotions and your mindset. In this case, we are talking about your physical environment, like your home, but encompassing all of those things. I think a really helpful exercise that we can think about here is understanding what the trigger is. So in this case, the emotional trigger is the coronavirus. And what is that having us feel? A plethora of different emotions, but let's just at a high level talk about it in terms of anxiety. So the emotional trigger is corona. The emotion is anxiety. Now, what we can do is we've got a couple options here. We can either run towards it, leverage that fear and that anxiety, or we can run away from it. So the best approach, if I were talking to my clients, is let's run towards it, right? So with that option there, if we're running towards it, think to yourself, is this helping me? Are these thoughts, positive or negative, are these thoughts helping me or hurting me? If they're hurting you, internalize them, like dive into them, reflect as much as you can, and then let them go. If they're helping you, basically, do something with that, leverage that information to run forward, to not be paralyzed in fear. So ask yourself, is this helping me or is this hurting me? And then also ask yourself, is there anything that I can do about the situation? Yes or no? If the answer is yes, then do it. Write down a list of all the different things you can do to alleviate this pain point, this anxiety, this fear. And if it's not, then to the best that you can,
let it go.
Reflect, and then let it go. Because holding on to that weight isn't helping you. Add to the solution, not the problem. And that's essentially it.
Okay.
So just going through that mental exercise helps.
All right, so let's try this.
Sorry, that was a lot.
No, it's good. I mean, actually, what we've just sort of got a chance to do, which we have overlooked, is sort of what you do professionally. So this is the kind of exercise you would do with one of your clients.
Yeah, it's all about the reframe of the mindset, because what I realized is, so the inner alignment piece is really understanding what your purpose is. So I on the front end, I really understand what it is that my clients want to achieve. What are they in alignment with in terms of their life holistically, not just in this moment. It's not just about this shit job that they're in and how do I overcome this conflict with Susie who sucks. It's it's much bigger than that. It's is this even an organization you want to be in this profession? So we do the inner alignment portion through several different psychological and coaching frameworks. And then we set goals to create a reality that is yours. Maybe that means quitting your job and your career entirely and doing something entirely different. And that's essentially what I do. But what I found was we all know how to set a goal. That's really easy. We all know how to fucking lose weight. It's a simple exercise of consuming less calories than you burn. Done. But why the fuck is that donut so enticing? I don't know. It's an emotional thing. I'm drawn to that donut because maybe it gives me pleasure because it tastes so good, or maybe it's alleviating a pain because I'm really stressed out subconsciously. Whatever that is that's what I work on. That's the inner work that I work on with my clients, is to reframe your mindset, to understand what's coming up for you subconsciously. And then through a bunch of mental and emotional exercises, we help you to overcome that, to reach your goals.
Yeah, I really like this idea of, are you moving toward or away from your anxiety? So so one of my least popular episodes so far,
tell me,
has been one that I just called boxing.
Can't wait to listen to it. Why is it so unpopular?
Well, it's newer, so that's part of the reason. But I think some of it is the average person sees boxing, and they don't see how boxing has anything to do with helping them live a remarkable life. And
what was your
what was my thinking behind it? So my thinking behind that episode, well, one, it was an experiment.
Yeah.
But some of the reason was that what I like about boxing is it's sort of this interesting metaphor for life.
Yeah.
And that is, and this is with the benefit of hindsight. So at first blush, boxing seems like this very solo sport, much like our lives.
Yeah.
But a boxer needs others. A boxer needs an opponent.
Absolutely.
A boxer needs a coach. A boxer needs a sparring partner. And that all of those people contribute to something that can be both scary yet beautiful.
Absolutely.
So I had two guests on. The second guest talked about, as a boxer, you can either be moving backwards or moving forwards, but you're never going to win if you're moving backwards. And it's really counterintuitive.
Yes.
For the average person and for the average boxer.
I love that.
Is that when someone's trying to punch you, to move closer rather than further away.
Yeah.
And in it, I explored this saying that I've had that I picked up from a reading when I was a young man, which is that the best punch is closest to the worst punch. And right, so that is that if you want to put yourself into a place where you're going to succeed, you also have to put yourself in a place where you're going to fail.
I love that.
And so our tendency is often to flee and to back up. Well, you can never win backing up.
Yes.
Now, you may survive backing up, but you're not going to win backing up.
I think that's really powerful. That actually can be said with our emotions as well. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so when you were talking about this, so can we talk through sort of a little bit of an example about this idea of having some anxiety? Why don't we do it with me?
Yeah.
If we can.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to give you some of my anxiety about this, and maybe you can help me reframe this.
Absolutely.
Okay. So I'm going to be honest. I'm actually not that scared about corona.
Yeah.
I'm not really scared about getting it. The base rates are very, very low.
Yes.
I'm not scared of it hurting me. If I do get it, I'm healthy. I'm robust.
Yeah.
You know, I got the flu the last couple of years and it sucked.
Yeah.
But I bounced back from it.
Yeah.
So I'm actually not living in fear in that way. I'll tell you where my anxieties are right now. It's twofold. The first is, in about 3 weeks, I'm launching a book that I've been working on for 2.5 years.
Yeah.
And I've put a lot into this book. I'm really proud of this book.
Yes.
I think it's a book that can help people. I really believe that to be the case.
Yeah.
I think it's a fun book, but it actually has actionable, useful lessons in it. And I want as many people to read it for that reason.
Yeah.
And I'm concerned that the launch and the success of the book is going to get crowded out by whatever happens in the next few weeks. It could be worse than we expect. It could be less bad, but I'm just like, boy, this is doesn't seem to be a great time to be launching this.
Yeah.
So that's the first one. The second anxiety, fear, concern is, if you've seen the movie The Wolf of Wall Street, there's a scene where Jordan Belfort gets his brokerage license. And it's his chance to be a trader and to start making his millions.
Yeah.
And the day that he gets his brokerage license is like the big stock crash of the 80s, 86 or something like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like worst luck ever.
Yes.
Today, Friday the 13th, as of now, the worst day of the pandemic. Tomorrow might be worse, might be better, who knows?
Yeah.
I just launched my website.
Which looks bomb.com.
You're very nice.
I love it.
Well, first of all, compared to what it was
so
before, I had such a trash website that whatever I put up was going to make it.
It wasn't great, but now it is bomb.com.
That's very nice.
Yes.
It's very nice. And it's actually petermcgraw.org. I don't know
Please go look at it. Give him some feedback.
I don't know what happens if you go to bomb.com, but be careful about that because it's probably a porn site.
Oh, sorry. I didn't think about that. Yes, but your website it looks fly as fuck. That's what I meant.
You're great. So well, on the site, I am prominently featured in a role that I've been aspiring to, that I've been cultivating and developing, and that is my professional speaking. I've gotten in the last year, I've gotten super serious about becoming not just a good professional speaker, but a great professional speaker.
Yes.
And I now have the content. I already have a great keynote, and the book was designed as a catalyst for this, new endeavor. And of course, conferences being canceled,
Yeah.
events being canceled, right? Like I feel a little bit like Jordan Belfort getting his brokerage license and then having the stock market crash.
Yeah.
So those are two areas of anxiety that I've been noticing. I realize that those might be completely different than what the average person is going through, which is they're concerned they have enough toilet paper, or they're concerned about the health and well-being of their children or their grandparents or whatever.
Yeah.
But that's what I got for you.
Yeah.
Isabella,
Yeah.
help me.
Hi.
Help me. What do you say?
Inner
Help my inner alignment.
So first off, I do want to honor you for expressing your fear. I also want to honor you for expressing your fear regardless of, so you did say something towards the end is, you said something along the lines of, I realize that this isn't a common fear that the average person is experiencing right now.
Yes.
The reality is even in a statement like that, that doesn't take away from the fact that this fear exists for you.
Yeah.
So I do want to acknowledge that because I think sometimes people think that because other people aren't experiencing this, like that's almost like apologizing for even having feelings in the first place. Something that I coach my clients to get out of because they're like, oh, well, Belle, they call me Bella, Isabella, whatever. Like Belle, maybe this isn't like that big of a fear or whatever. That's minimizing your fear, but that doesn't take away from the fact that it still exists. So I honor you for saying that. And then let's kind of dive into it. So there's a couple different things that I'm hearing. So the first one is the book launch and the success of the book launch. Let me ask you, how do you define success?
Of the book launch or success?
Of the book. Of the book in particular.
That's a good question. It's interesting because I don't know what that looks like. It's just this view that it might now be less successful in some way.
Yeah.
Right.
So I guess and we can double down on this now or we can do it later. But I guess what I would ask you is to really understand how you define success, because is that a number? Is that like a number of book sales? Is that like a gross annual income from this as a book, or is the real success? And I'm just giving out ideas here. Typically, I don't ask guiding questions, but in this case, for the sake of time,
we have to. Yeah, we have a lot of things.
Yeah,
to cover.
Exactly. So for the sake of time, the guiding question then would be: is success to you that even if 10 people read it, and I know that's a small number, that's not really what I mean. Even if 500 people read it,
yes,
and that's all you get in the short term. Would that be successful for you? Because I ask in the short term, because the reality is Corona will not exist forever, at least to this heightened state of anxiety. So in the short term, are you okay launching this book, only making X amount of sales, but knowing that X amount of people receive this content and can benefit from it in the short term? Because once this Corona stuff goes away and you can then refocus, double down on your market or on new marketing, reposition yourself, are you going to be satisfied with that outcome?
That's fair. So I will say this. I actually don't care about making money off the book.
Yeah.
I mean, if I do, that'd be nice. I really want as many people to read it as possible.
Yes.
And so your question is a good one. And just hearing you ask it, it already helps in terms of, I mean, there is a little bit of me that just goes, I think things are going to be fine. We've dealt with, this kind of stuff on a global scale before.
Yes.
We made it through.
Yes.
It's not always pretty.
Yes.
And by the way, if this is the exception, well, my lack of book sales is the least of my worries.
Yes. But also, an additional frame to that is your lack of book sales. If that is the worst, your lack of book sales in the present moment.
That's fair.
Because once this goes away and you double down like crazy on marketing and you expand your reach, you're going to be just fine.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
I appreciate you. I do appreciate that. And again, these things are the thing that's really fascinating about anxiety.
Yeah.
Is the threats don't have to be real.
Exactly. It's all about our mindset.
Right. It's just about these imaginary
Real
things
or
that
perceived.
might happen and so on. And so even just, talking about, okay, well, what would be less successful? And I go, I don't even know what less successful would be.
Exactly.
Already suggests that it's...
So an exercise that I take my clients through is Tim Ferriss's fear setting exercise.
Yes,
he has a great TED Talk on it. It's like 10 minutes. It's beautiful. But I take them through that because that actually helps with the inner alignment portion. You lean into your biggest fears. You address what they are head on. And you're like, fuck it. For every fear that I have, there's a billion different solutions. So while I feel stuck in this moment, it's momentary.
Yes.
You take action and you override that.
And I'm the king of problem solving.
Yeah.
The issue with anxiety is it often will get you when you're weak.
Absolutely.
And so when you're not able to, when you're coping.
I love that you said that. I love that you said that because that's very self-aware. And what we realize too, and I think a lot of people don't realize, I actually had to learn this for myself too, is that when we feel negative triggers like anxiety or negative emotions like anxiety or fear or whatever else, we're not in a clear state of mind.
Yes.
So that's worth acknowledging.
Yeah, it's like that, 5 a.m. is a terrible time to try to problem solve.
Yeah.
It's where anxiety is at its strongest and you're at your weakest.
Yeah.
So I think I can do the other one and save some time, which is the speaking.
Yeah.
And you can tell me, and then you can guide me as needed. So, you say, can I do anything about this? Mm-hmm. Yes or no?
Yeah.
So the answer is yes.
Yeah.
So I in this book, Shtick to Business,
yes,
I talk about the reversal
mm-hmm.
and how powerful reversals are. And so thinking in reverse, producing an opposing perspective. So one of the best reversals is when you are tempted to say something's bad, you reverse it and you say it's good. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So, say, okay, so missed opportunities for speaking is bad.
Yeah.
But instead I say it's good.
You say it's good and something?
And here's
okay.
why it's good.
Got it.
Is it frees up time and energy to then turn these ideas into other things that don't require me to get on a plane and fly all over the globe.
Yeah.
Right. So I can turn them into an online course, webinars, and so on.
Yeah.
And so what might at first seem like a bad thing.
Yeah.
And I have all these sayings. One of my sayings is, it's difficult to judge the goodness or badness of something while it's happening.
Yeah.
And so it's difficult to know the goodness or badness of this pandemic while it's happening. We won't know the goodness or badness of it for months or years, whether it be on a personal level, professional level, nation level, global level, in the moment. And so my thing is yes. And so what I have to do is just say, okay, those lost opportunities are actually gained time, energy, to make other things.
Yeah. I love that you say that. So I do something very similar, almost exactly very similar to what you just said with my clients. But it's funny because the little tweaks in our language, it's so amazing how powerful the use of language is. So when you say something like the word bad,
okay, like
instantly, and it might be difficult to do now, but instantly that actually has even like a direct response on your physiology. Like if someone's yelling at you, if I'm yelling at you right now, you would feel it somewhere in your body. Maybe your heart, your chest would tense up or whatever. That's your physiology changing to like a response. So if I said the word bad versus good, right, you might feel differently in your physiology. And what we know too is that even like the use of words as it pertains to our physiology, like that ingrains a response in our subconscious where we store these different meanings. And so without getting too technical about it, what I do with my clients is instead of using words like bad, if that's what comes up, what I would say is there a different word that we can use that means the same thing? Okay. So if they said bad, I would say challenging.
I see.
And so there, that actually helps because when we leverage those words to not feel so intense on our physiology, then we can actually come out of our thinking to be less paralyzed with fear. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So then the start would be to reframe that word. So we would say challenging. Yes, this was challenging. And so we acknowledge that without suppressing our feelings. We acknowledge the challenge. And how do I leverage this? And from there, like, what is the positive that we can see from this? And the reason why I wanted to kind of like point that out is because I know for me, like, if you were to say that to me, I'd be like, oh yeah, that's cool. Yes, this is bad. And then you want me to say it's good, almost like dismissive positivity, which is not what you were doing. I know that's not what you're doing. Mm-hmm. Dismissive positivity is like, oh yeah, Corona sucks, but like the sun is shining and it's great outside. It's like, no, Corona doesn't feel good. Yes. Corona is challenging. There's another perspective, and we get to sit inside and catch up on that book that we didn't get to catch up on, or we get to, right, or look for that job that we were meaning to apply for to get out of our shit job that we're currently in. I don't know, right? So it's encompassing that, but really focusing on our language, because sometimes if we say things like bad versus challenging, it almost amplifies the situation even a little bit more. But essentially what you were doing.
Yeah,
too.
That's interesting. Yeah, I study emotions, so I'm used to using a lot of negative emotional terms.
No, of course.
That's fine. But yeah, so that's my attempt to use your.
That was beautiful. That was beautiful. I hope that was helpful.
No, it's good actually, just to be able to admit it.
Yeah.
You know, and then also just sort of talk it through.
Absolutely.
Has been useful. I already feel better.
Yeah.
I feel better. So
one of the things, and I do want to compliment you for expressing your feelings. I know that sounds really like woo-woo and willy-nilly, but I think that's actually such an underrated thing. Sometimes it's so interesting. There are 3 motivators of our emotions, and I'm sure you know this. It's to, like a pull towards like pleasure, a push towards pain, like we want to avoid pain, and then to protect us. And it's interesting. There are so many of us out there that are just so terrified to even admit that we're scared.
Yes.
And so instead we cover it up and we're like, oh no, everything's fine. Mm-hmm. It takes so much bravery to lean into that and say, this is what I'm feeling, to practice stillness, and then say, all right, now that I felt that, what am I going to do about it?
Yeah. So, well, this entire podcast is an exercise in that for me.
Yeah, you're doing great.
So I talk about all the things that I never talk about in any of my other work.
I love this.
And my bachelorhood was always something that was always private.
Yes.
And honestly, launching this podcast was kind of scary to me.
Yeah.
What's been really wonderful about it is the response has been so positive.
Absolutely.
And I do believe and agree with this idea that if I'm not showing up in my authentic self, how the hell am I supposed to help people?
Yeah.
Who are looking for help.
Absolutely.
And looking for inspiration and looking for new ideas and wanting permission to be the person that they feel comfortable being.
Absolutely. I honor you for doing that.
It's very nice. You're great. So let's get into the big meaty question.
Yeah, buddy.
Yeah. So I think that I'm going to add one little quick. Let's get into the big stuff. So what we've covered so far, I'm going to do a little recap. So recognizing that physical isolation does not have to equal emotional isolation.
Yes.
And to use this time to ask for help if you need it, and to offer help to people who might need it. The next one is knowing that your normal day-to-day has been disrupted, and by virtue of that, you're probably going to be a little bit more homebound than you would be otherwise. Lack of social events, remote working, and so on. How can you make that environment better for yourself? Whether it be tidying up, getting more fresh air, getting a little bit of sunlight. If you do go to the supermarket, I'm sure they have flowers. There hasn't been a rush on flowers. Get yourself some flowers.
Some essential oils.
Exactly. And then the other one is, how do you sort of tidy up your emotions, so to speak? That is, recognizing what you're feeling anxious about, and then figuring out, are your reactions helping you or hurting you?
Absolutely.
How do you lean into and move into those?
Yeah.
And trying to figure out what you can do about them, if there's something you can do about them, and then trying to let them go if there's nothing you can do about them. Something
that I do want to add on that we didn't talk about really quickly is just being mindful of your physical being. So as we stock up on high sodium foods that will last us forever, I pinky promise you that there is a way to do this in a way that you can also be mindful of your health, because as we know, there is a mind-body connection. Your mind as it correlates to your gut.
Yes.
So if you're eating shit foods, you're going to naturally feel
like shit.
Yes, exactly. So to the extent that you can, and I say this because I know it's challenging, but you can eat well during this, and you can stock up on things that as your emergency supply, but also be mindful that you're still a living, breathing being that needs to be well nourished. So that's the big thing. And even though like we're homebound for the most part, there are little things that you can do physically, like like squats, up and down, just a little bit of movement every day, even in the comfort of your home, regardless of the size, that will actually help you to stay mentally stimulated.
And look, it's okay to go for a walk. It's actually okay to go outside the house.
I love that you said that.
Like,
it
it's
is.
not,
it is.
It's fine to go for a walk.
We're
Like,
going to be okay.
Bundle up and get some fresh air. So I'm glad you brought that up, because I think what we're starting to venture into are sort of these bigger issues in people's lives. And so, as I said, when things aren't going well, when things are challenging, that's the time to reassess and to think about little changes and bigger changes.
Yeah.
So the launch of this podcast is going to coincide or come very close to two other podcasts that I've already taped.
Yes.
One about nutrition and one about exercise, movement, and pain.
Yeah. And
so I have a saying that I ask my students a lot of times. I ask myself a lot, and I say, is your health number one? Is your health number one? Mm-hmm. Is your health number one? And the reason behind that is connected to, the safety briefing on an airplane, which is put on your oxygen mask before helping others.
Absolutely.
And so I feel like if you want to live a remarkable life, the foundation for a remarkable life is a remarkable body.
Yes.
Not an Instagram body, but a remarkable body. That is a body that functions well, right? That is energized, that is healthy. And the path to that is good sleep, good nutrition, and good movement.
Yes.
And so now, if you want to also then be able to support others in your life, you need also that good foundation. Yeah. Because if you can barely take care of yourself, how are you going to help take care of others?
Absolutely.
And vice versa.
Absolutely.
And so what I like, I almost just said, what I like about the coronavirus, but what
you're saying that.
I'm saying that now.
Okay.
What I like about the coronavirus is it reminds us that our health does matter to us.
It does. Absolutely.
And so sometimes it might take something this acute to remind us of that, right? So, you were talking about the temptation of donuts or whatever it is earlier. Sugar in the moment is nice, but it doesn't often serve our long-term goals.
Yes, yes.
And so I think when in terms of if you're going to make some change and think about how when you move out of this and life returns back to normal.
Yeah.
What might be some of those things? I would offer up this thing is that question of, look, if you're scared about the virus, if you're scared of getting the virus, then I know that you care about your health.
Yes.
And so if you care about your health, you shouldn't just care about it when there's a virus. You should care about it generally and what might be some of the changes that you would want to think about doing. And I put forth those three categories: improving your sleep, improving your nutrition, and improving your movement. Two of those three, I have some podcasts that are coming out. The third one I'm working on.
That's beautiful. I love that. Can't wait to hear those. But I do love that you said that. I'm putting together and I told you this before, a behavioral planner, which actually encompasses 7 different stages of life mastery. And at the simplest form, at the simplest summary, the number one is physical mastery.
Oh, nice.
And I'm sure you've heard about that too. And so basically it talks about movement and nutrition and sleep, and all of this goes in this planner, and it actually forces you, that's the inner alignment portion of it. It actually forces you to think about, deeper questions like, is your health, from your perspective, is that ego driven? Or is that spirit driven?
I see.
Like going back to what you said, about, your body doesn't have to be an Instagram body. You're right. Some people think that it does. I used to think that. I used to think that I had to be a 00 my whole life. Okay, I know that sounds a little ridiculous, but I didn't
even know there were double zeros.
That actually was a mindset.
Okay.
And so for me, and then I realized that was ego driven. And now I look at my health from a perspective of balance and being spirit driven of, am I well nourished? And is this the nourishment that's going in my body? Does that help to self-regulate my emotional state? And if that helps to self-regulate my emotional state, how is this nutrition that I'm inserting into my body adding to my level of productivity? So these are the questions that I even ask my clients from a 7 stage of mastery, portion of it. And that's the inner alignment.
I see.
Yeah. So that's important. So while everyone here is taking that moment to reflect, think about it. Everything that you ingest, what is the domino effect of that holistically?
Yes. Not only on your gut, but also on your emotions
and your level of productivity and even the way that you interact with people. We know that certain foods like salmon and stuff like that actually increases like your serotonin and your dopamine levels, right? Like those are all the feel good hormones. So even while we're stuck in our apartment and who knows what, right? For how long, think about the stuff that you're ingesting and how you can actually increase those dopamine levels, those endorphins, the serotonins, so you feel better.
Yes. And going for a walk helps with that too.
Yes. Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
So what, so if people are looking at this as an opportunity to spur some change moving forward, I put forth health as a category that people might want to consider.
Yeah.
And an important one that has compounding effects.
Absolutely.
What is there something in particular personally, or do you think that folks might want to think about?
I think at the highest level, for the sake of time, and I only know this because I'm literally writing like a book about this right now, is if they go online and they just quick Google search of like the 7 stages of life mastery, just look at that and then ask yourself a question of where do I fall on like a 1 to 10 scale of my level of satisfaction in these areas.
Okay, wait, but what are the 7 levels?
Oh, let me tell you.
Let me tell you.
So at the basic level, this is the behavioral planner that I'm doing.
Okay,
so basically, I want to give people a mini PhD in psychology and 20 pages or less, and that's the planner. And then I help you to overcome limiting beliefs. So the 7 stages is
one is physical.
Physical, that is the baseline.
Okay.
That's the very baseline. The next one is hold on, I got it right here. The next one is emotional mastery.
Okay.
And then it's relationships.
Okay.
And then it's time. Okay. It's your career and mission, your finances, and your contribution and spirituality.
Very nice. So I'm going to grab one of these.
Yes, grab whichever one you want.
I'm going to grab finances.
Okay. Yeah.
And the reason is so I had Money Amy on. Money Amy is one popular financial planner these days.
Yeah.
So Money Amy and I talked about steps to financial freedom. And so what I think, one of the things that we talked about, and one of the nice things about Money Amy, she's very good about steps.
Yeah.
Number 1, eliminate credit card debt.
Yes.
Right. And so on and so forth. One of those early steps is to have an emergency fund. 6 months cash.
Yes.
Or the equivalent, a HELOC or something like that.
Yeah.
But ideally cash.
Yes.
Unaffected by the stock market. That's why it's cash.
Yes.
That you could, if you lost your job, if you got sick, if something happened, suppose you had to quit your job because you had to care for someone, you could live for 6 months without worrying.
Absolutely. Yes.
Now, what I think is the case is there's a lot of people out there who right now are really uncertain about the world. Might not want to put themselves in a situation that they might believe to be harmful. We can debate the harmfulness of being in public or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But there's a bunch of people out there who cannot afford to make that decision.
Yeah.
Or cannot afford to have the decision made for them.
Yes.
For example, you work as a server in a banquet hall.
Yeah.
And now a bunch of the events are being canceled.
Yeah.
And now you work by the banquet kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so what would be a great outcome for this is for you to go, oh, I'm so happy I have this.
Yes.
This is why I made sacrifices to get here.
Yes.
Or moving forward, this is a place that I want to be.
Yeah.
For the next calamity that happens.
Yeah.
Because life has calamities.
Yes.
That's there.
Yes.
And so I like that idea that you might, as you look through these 7 stages, I will obviously put a link to this in the exhibits. That's an example of one that someone might consider.
So going back to what you said in terms of people being well positioned or not, especially in the moment, when you're in the moment and you're trying to make big time life adjustments, that's very challenging because that's reactionary versus being proactive.
Right.
So like going back to your example of the waitress who, is now at the, what's the word? at the surrender, I suppose, of the environment,
Yes.
right? That it's too late. It's too late.
I don't think this can help you now.
So actually, but what they can do in this moment, and this is what I work through is, so I don't go through, when I'm working with my clients, I don't go through here's your 7 stages to get out of debt. Like, that's just not my forte.
Sure.
What I go through is the behavioral patterns and purchasing patterns of why you do what you do. So what I would encourage people to do is look at the 7 stages of mastery and ask yourself really hard questions. And that's why I do what I do and I'm good at what I do, is because I ask you really difficult questions. For example, if you're focused on your finances right now and you haven't been proactive and you're at a place of reactivity, pause, practice stillness, and let's reflect for a second. I want you to think about what your purchasing habits are and why you do what you do. Are you purchasing things in order to feel a certain kind of way, but what you're really doing is masking, like you're avoiding feeling something. So let me give you an example. Are you purchasing that $10,000 purse so that way you feel significant, right? You feel like you're special or you have control over environment, when you really don't need that $10,000 purse, because you're trying to alleviate a pain point. You're trying to alleviate your lack of significance, right? So I really ask these behavioral questions in terms of, what are you really getting at when you do this thing? Because what people tend to realize or not realize is that we do one thing thinking we're doing it to feel great.
Right.
But ultimately we're just masking the fact that we feel like shit inside.
Yeah, that's great.
So these are questions that like people can ask themselves right now. Why am I doing what I'm doing? So understanding, your pleasure response and how that's masking a pain response.
I see.
So that's what people can do when they ask themselves at these 7 different stages, what's going on? Understanding their behavioral patterns. And that's what I do at all these 7 stages of mastery.
I see.
And we talk about ego, we talk about shadow work, we talk about inner child, attachment styles. It's deep psychology.
Clearly. Yeah, I think, obviously we can't solve everybody's problems here in this short period.
Yeah.
But I do think what I like is to try, again, look at the positive aspects of this situation.
Yeah.
One of the positive things is what it is going to do, I think, for the average person. So first of all, I think one thing is it's going to bring out the worst in some people. It's going to bring out the best in some people.
Yeah.
I think that if your goal is to live a remarkable life,
yes,
a situation like this shines the spotlight on the parts of your life that are not remarkable.
Exactly.
That are challenging.
And how you respond says everything you need to know.
That's right. So I think, to me, obviously, career, and especially for the average listener of this podcast, tends to be one of those places that either they're thriving or they're experiencing a challenge.
Yes.
Right? So you could imagine the following. This gives you some time to think and reflect, and you go, this is not exactly where I want to be right now.
Yeah.
Or your job sends you home and you're remote working, and you go, boy, I never want to go back to that office park. You know what I mean? I've never, as a young child, I never dreamed of working in an office park.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. And so we have to acknowledge, and I'm sure you deal with this all the time with your clients, is the following. It's just often easier to just keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
Because it's familiar, it's safe, and so on, and you never feel like you have to go back to the beginning.
Yes.
And yet sometimes going back to the beginning is going to be, that's the classic, 1 step backwards for 2 steps forwards.
Yeah.
And so do you have any advice for that when someone is in that place where they go, well, I'm just good at doing this thing.
Yeah.
It's not terribly satisfying. It's fine. It pays the bills. And then you get to this sort of crisis point where you're like, I don't want to go back to that office park.
Yeah. Yeah. I have quotes for days, by the way, to any situation.
Okay.
So I love what you said there. One of my favorite quotes is, in a situation like that, it's something along the lines of, when you're starting again from scratch, you're not starting from a beginner's perspective. You're starting from experience.
Yes.
So just being mindful of that in your starting place. So that's probably where I would jump that process off. And then I would go back to the inner alignment portion, and that encompasses so many different frameworks, whether it's a psychological framework or a coaching framework. I kind of blend the two in what I do. And so I would then say, well, what are you good at? Like, let's find out what your purpose is. And this is what you and I talked about earlier, aligning back with your purpose. So I always reference Viktor Frankl's work, who is, a Holocaust survivor and also a famous psychologist. And he talks about a man's search for meaning. So he basically gives you, simply stated, how you find or where you find it. And in 3 bullets, it really is, you find it in, doing really great work or work that is meaningful. You also find it in experiences or people that you meet. And then the third one is basically just saying that we find meaning in experiences, and that we at least, even in the hardest of experiences like the Holocaust, or in this case, Corona, right? We can find meaning in that and turn it into a positive.
Yes.
So basically I walk through my clients, where you find meaning. So I reference his framework, and then how we find it, which is the hard part. And this is all trial and error, and you find that throughout your life. But I ask you questions using a framework called Ikigai, which is a Japanese framework.
Yes, I'm familiar with all the overlapping Venns.
Exactly. Yes. That asks you questions like, what are you good at? What do you love? What does the world need? And what can you be paid for? So we go through a massive intensive of that. And then from there, then we do the goal setting part. And then from the goal setting part, we figure out what's coming up for you subconsciously. What are all of these fears that you need to overcome to really level up as the best possible person you can be? So everyone that's locked away in their apartment right now, get out a pen and paper, because this could be your moment. This could be the turning point for you.
I know it's trite to say, but you only live once.
YOLO.
And so as a result of this, I also think that if you set forth a goal, look, I have my term for it, remarkable.
Yeah.
Some other people have other terms for it. But if you start to go, well, that's what I want to do, then it's very easy to go, well, is working in this office park accomplishing that?
Yeah.
And nothing against office parks. I mean, if people are perfectly happy with that.
Exactly.
But you got to be honest with yourself.
Yes.
Right? So
yes.
That's not acceptable for me.
Yeah.
It never will be. But if it is for you, that's fine. But if it's not, and you keep doing it, now you're not being authentic to yourself.
Agreed.
Yes.
Agreed.
So I think I'd like to wrap with a particular idea, and maybe I'm not sure I can pull this off, but I'm going to do my best.
I believe in you.
So I was familiar with Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning from a different perspective. And I came across it when I was beginning my work on humor.
Yeah.
And when I was working on my first book, The Humor Code. And in that book, we take a look at humor where you least expect it.
Okay.
And my co-author Joel Warner and I go to Palestine and in search of comedy in Palestine, in a place that is struggling, a challenging place to be. And we were optimistic that we were going to find comedy there.
Okay.
And the reason why we were optimistic that we were going to find comedy there is because there was comedy in the concentration camps. That is not stand-up comedy. But they found humor. Moments of humor and laughter.
By way of coping.
That's right. So when there is a robust individual, when there is someone who is facing tragedy, but able to overcome that tragedy through their coping, through their resilience, through their perspective, there's an opportunity for laughter. And what I would invite people to do, I'm trying not to be too preachy with this podcast, but what I would invite people to do is to pay attention to those moments of levity that you're naturally having during these sort of difficult times. And to try to look for opportunities for levity with the people that you're close with your friends, and even sometimes with a little bit of strangers, just recognizing that if the folks who went through the worst possible oppression were able to do it, then we ought to be able to do it in the face of this kind of uncertainty.
I hear what you're saying. Definitely adding humor by way of coping. There's science behind that. There absolutely is. So I love your idea behind that. You know Joe Dispenza, right? So he talks about like the quantum field, and he just talks a lot about, he's also a very famous psychologist as well. Or wait, I want to make sure I get his title right. I have it written down here somewhere. Anyway, so he talks about that, but he also talks about the frequency of our thoughts. So if we have a lower frequency thought, which is like super negative, I mean, that actually has like waves, like brain waves that we like, energetic waves that we attract to. So if we're able to elevate our thinking to a higher frequency using a coping mechanism such as humor, I mean, that also has contagious trickling effects as well.
Yeah, certainly laughter is contagious.
Exactly. I love what you said there. Yes.
All right. So, listeners, I know this is a deeply uncertain time and people hate uncertainty. And I know that we're getting a lot of images and messages that are often negative, at the best mixed. And just wanted to try to put forth, as meager as it may be, some information, some perspective, a bit of encouragement, perhaps some inspiration, that this might, when you look back on it, be seen as something that is good and useful, and will help you thrive living your solo life. Isabella, as predicted by my friend, you were a great fit. I really appreciate you saying yes to this.
Thank you.
And providing some super interesting information and also a little bit of help as I deal with my own set of anxieties around all of this.
Thank you. Sending everyone so much love and light during this challenging time. Thank you, Peter.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you for listening to Solo, the single person's guide to a remarkable life. For more about our guests and show notes, go to petermcgraw.org. Please subscribe and share with your single friends.